At the edge of the multiverse, Thanos held his hand in the final shape of the snap, and for one breath, all creation seemed to obey.
Across 1,000 realities, half the voices had already broken into dust. Cities stopped mid-traffic. Battlefields went hollow. Worlds that had screamed for centuries fell into a hard, mathematical silence.
This was the victory he had carved from loss, war, and blood. This was supposed to be balance. Then the horizon split. Not a crack in stone.
Not a wound in sky, but a tear running through stacked realities. Galaxies tilted out of alignment and scraped against one another in slow, blazing arcs. Dead stars blinked where living stars should have burned. Whole timelines folded like torn maps, spilling fragments of unborn wars, vanished children, and planets that had never formed. Thanos watched the dust spread, expecting stillness to follow. Instead, the dust moved like a plague. A spiral galaxy collapsed inward, then unraveled backward, its suns dying twice in the same second. A river of time snapped loose above him, carrying broken moons and pieces of forgotten centuries through the void. The multiverse did not settle. It convulsed. The silence he had demanded became a grinding roar. Every shattered reality pulled against the next, and the space beneath Thanos' feet began to crumble into lightless fractures. His victory stood before him, vast and exact, and it was failing. The fractures climbed toward Thanos in jagged pulses, and the stones answered before he could command them. Power flared across his hand, not outward into the void, but inward, drilling into bone and nerve. He clenched his fist. The light did not obey. It crawled under his skin in 6 separate burns, each one fighting the others, each one dragging a different law of reality through his arm. He staggered one step, then locked his knees against the pull. The stones had served him through slaughter, conquest, and the final snap. Now they hissed like trapped stars. Space bent around his knuckles. Time bucked, throwing the same heartbeat through his chest again and again. His palms split with heat. Purple fire spat between his fingers and vanished into black vacuum. Thanos lifted the burning hand toward the collapsing dark and forced his voice through his teeth. I paid the price. I gave the universe mercy. Why does it still break? No answer came. The silence struck harder than an enemy. The stones surged again, and his arm slammed downward as if a planet had chained itself to his wrist. He caught himself before falling, fingers digging into a floating shard of broken reality. The shard cut deep, then dissolved. He looked at the wounds closing and reopening across his hand. For the first time since the snap, his command produced no order. Only resistance, only pain. The void kept roaring, and Thanos roared back into it, demanding a reason from nothing.
The void did not answer with speech. It split open in blue light. A single point appeared beyond the collapsing galaxies, sharp enough to cut through the black between realities. The roaring fractures faltered around it. Broken timelines still dragged their wreckage through space, but each shard slowed as the light widened, then steadied, then pushed the darkness back in a clean, silent circle. Thanos turned toward it, his breath still grinding through clenched teeth. The blue radiance advanced without force. It did not strike the ruins. It touched them. Dust stopped scattering. A dead star, cracked in half a moment before, held its shape as if an unseen hand had cupped it. Rivers of time that had been whipping loose across the void curled inward and became still. Not repaired, not conquered, simply quieted. Then the lotus emerged. It rose from the cosmic dust beneath the light, vast and radiant, each petal unfolding across miles of vacuum with no sound at all. Galaxies reflected along its surface like drops of water. Where its edge passed, ash-like remnants of vanished worlds ceased spinning and hovered in place. At its center stood character, too. He did not brace against the storm. He did not raise a weapon. He stood as if the collapsing multiverse were a river passing around a stone. The blue light gathered behind him, softened, and spread through the ruins. The dark no longer swallowed everything. It waited. For the first time since the snap, the broken cosmos paused. The pause did not soften Thanos. It gave him room to hear the stranger's voice without the cover of collapsing stars. Krishna spoke once, and the words moved through the wreckage with the pressure of deep water.
Balance, born from fear, is not balance.
It is only fear divided into numbers. Thanos' jaw locked. The gauntlet crackled against his ruined hand, but he did not lift it yet. He had crossed worlds, broken armies, and carved his answer into existence with a snap. Now this being stood before him and reduced that sacrifice to a mistake. Krishna did not step forward.
He let the sentence work. Around them, the suspended dust trembled in thin rings, as if the ruined cosmos itself had heard the accusation and refused to cover it. Thanos pulled his burning fist close to his chest. False? The word came out low, scraped through smoke and pain. I watched civilizations drown in their own hunger. I did what no one else had the strength to do. Krishna's reply landed without force. You measured terror and called it justice.
You silenced half of creation because you could not bear its pleading. The stones flared, then stuttered. Thanos narrowed his stare. For one hard second, no command left his hand. The insult was not the challenge.
The wound was that the challenge touched the exact place he had sealed beneath conquest. Someone had looked at the price he paid and refused to bow before it.
Thanos held the silence for one beat longer, as if the void still belonged to him. Then he stepped toward the lotus,
and the suspended dust around his feet scattered backward. Name yourself, he said. No wanderer crosses the end of creation and speaks to me as judge. Krishna's answer did not rise in volume. It spread. I am the melody that holds creation together.
The words touched the broken timelines first. Their jagged edges stopped scraping against one another. Then the dead spaces between galaxies began to vibrate, not with sound alone, but with order, pulse, pause, return. Thanos tilted his head,
listening despite himself. The quiet that had followed the snap was no longer empty. It had a rhythm he had not commanded. He drove one foot down, and a shockwave rolled from him in a hard black ring. For an instant, the rhythm buckled. The lotus petals bent under the pressure.
Then the pressure reversed. The cosmic winds answered. They came from every direction at once, dragging star ash, broken seconds, and fractured light into spirals around the two figures. Krishna remained at the center. Thanos stood opposite him,
the space between them tightening like a drawn cable. No blade moved, no planet broke.
Yet every drifting fragment around them aligned into two currents. One pulled toward domination, one curved toward harmony. The battle had begun before either struck.
It began as a question forced into the bones of the multiverse. Does creation survive by command or by song?
The question hung between them, and Thanos answered it with movement. He lifted his damaged hand until the stones cut light across the spiraling dust,
then closed his burned fingers around nothing, as if gripping every world he had spared from collapse. Command is mercy, he said. When a universe is starving, choice becomes a cruelty. I ended the pleading before it became extinction. Around his fist, broken images sparked into being. Cities buckling under famine, ships clawing at empty skies, oceans stripped to poison, mothers holding out their hands to stores with nothing left inside. Thanos forced the visions outward like evidence presented to a court. They would have devoured themselves. I took half, so the rest could breathe. For a moment, the wind slowed. Even the dust seemed to study the ruin he displayed. Then Krishna raised one hand, and the images stopped moving, not vanished, stopped. Each frame held a face at the instant before loss, a mouth open, a hand reaching, a child waiting for an answer that never came. Krishna's voice entered the stillness without pressure. Mercy without compassion is not mercy. It is tyranny with cleaner arithmetic. Thanos' arm dipped half an inch. The stones spat light against his palm. He snapped his elbow straight again, harder than before. But the correction came too fast. Krishna had not attacked his power.
He had cut into the reason Thanos used to steady his hand, and Thanos' jaw locked around a reply he could not release.
Krishna let Thanos' unfinished answer die in the vacuum. Then he turned his palm toward the frozen faces Thanos had forced into the void, and each image released one last pulse. It was not speech. It was breath, heartbeat, footstep, door opening, seed splitting, wave striking stone. The pulses gathered, weak at first, then layered until the broken galaxies around them trembled with the pattern of lives interrupted.
Krishna said. You did not balance the universe. You cut out its heartbeat and called the silence peace. The words struck the surrounding dark like a bell. Far below them, dead timelines bent inward, folding around the wound Thanos had made. For the first time, the battlefield showed its true shape. It was not one god facing another. It was a crossroads built from every choice that had been stolen. On one side, fragments locked into hard lines, counted, divided, reduced, commanded. On the other, shattered lights moved in relation to one another, adjusting, answering, returning. Control stood against harmony, a clenched universe against a living one. Krishna stepped forward,
and the radiant lotus moved with him without disturbing the dust. This meeting is not punishment, he said. It is the point where destiny refuses to move farther under fear. The void tightened. The two currents rose higher, circling Thanos and Krishna like vast turning doors.
Every star that remained held its fire, waiting to learn which path would claim what was left of creation.
The waiting stars did not move, and that stillness worked on Thanos harder than any strike. He kept his damaged fist raised,
but the muscles in his forearm tightened without command. Krishna did nothing except hold his place before him,
calm enough that the raging void seemed to measure its breath against his silence. Thanos shifted 1 foot forward, pressing for the old sensation of dominance.
The familiar moment when reality bent before he spoke. A ring of shattered timeline fragments answered him at first. They spun toward his hand, sharp and obedient, forming a crude crown of broken futures around the gauntlet.
Then the circle wavered. One fragment slipped out of orbit. Another cracked down the middle and leaked pale fire into the dark. Thanos closed his fist harder. The stones flared back in jagged bursts, not as weapons, but as trapped suns striking the walls of his grip. Heat climbed through his arm, his teeth clenched. The command in his throat broke into a rough breath. Krishna's gaze remained steady, and the space between them refused to bend. That refusal reached Thanos before any wound could. His certainty had always moved first. Now it arrived late, limping behind pain. Anger took its place. He dragged the gauntlet higher, forcing the stones into alignment, while sparks tore across his knuckles and vanished into the void. The light around his fist grew violent, uneven, hungry. He planted his feet wider, bracing against a collapse that had started inside his own command. Thanos held the violent light close to his side, refusing to lower it, refusing to step back. The unstable stones hammered against his will in short bursts, and each burst threw hard shadows across the broken timelines behind him. Krishna gave him no command. He left a strip of silence open between them, wide enough for Thanos to unclench his hand, narrow enough that Thanos could feel it like pressure at his throat. For one breath, the Titan's jaw worked without sound. The path was there. Release the grip. Admit the wound. Let the stolen universe speak. Then pride locked his mouth shut. He crushed the tremor in his hand against his palm and stepped through a drift of cooling stardust. The dust scattered around his legs, drawn backward by the force gathering in his chest. His laugh came out low, scraped raw by heat. "You stand on song and call it strength," he said. "You hide judgment inside calm words and expect me to kneel." The broken timelines twitched at the word kneel, then shrank from him as the stones gave another angry pulse. Thanos leaned into that pulse instead of away from it. Pain bent his fingers. He forced them open again. "Let your divine melody play," he sneered into the void. "Let it touch every dead star. It will not silence the thunder of a god." The last word rolled outward and struck the fragments like a command. The fragments did not obey. They rattled. Thanos heard the failure, hardened around it, and turned the sound into defiance. The defiant words had barely faded when Thanos lifted the Infinity Gauntlet above shoulder height, not in haste, but with the grinding slowness of a siege engine taking aim. Each stone answered in a different violence. Space bent inward, time stuttered. Power crawled across his fist in purple fractures. Reality bled red, sparks that vanished before they could fall. Soul light burned low and heavy, while mind light stabbed through the vacuum in thin yellow lines. The last stone pulsed against his thumb like a caged star. The void reacted first. Dust stopped drifting. Broken timeline shards froze mid-turn. Their jagged edges pointed toward him like iron filings toward a magnet. Far galaxies pulled their spirals tighter, as if bracing against pressure no telescope could measure. Even the silence changed. It did not deepen, it locked. Thanos drew his elbow back another inch. The movement cost him. The gauntlet bucked, driving heat through his wrist and up into his shoulder. For a moment, his arm dipped. The gathered light sagged with it, and the dead fragments around him loosened. Then he forced the arm straight again.
Krishna watched from the radiant lotus without stepping forward. No warning came, no counterforce rose.
That restraint sharpened the threat more than resistance could have. Thanos spread his fingers by force, one joint at a time, and the stones aligned into a single, blinding point. Around them, creation held still, waiting for the command that had not yet fallen. The command fell as a sound too small for what it carried. Thanos pressed thumb and finger together, and the snap cracked across the edge of the multiverse. For one instant, nothing moved. Then, the nearest star went out. Not dimmed, out. Its corona folded inward and vanished, leaving a black wound where fire had been. A second star shuddered and died.
Then a third. Across the torn horizon, whole clusters blinked off in uneven bursts.
Like breath being cut from a chest, the void thickened around the fallen light. Frozen dust lost its shine and drifted blind.
Timeline fragments that had glimmered moments before became cold silhouettes, scraping against one another without sparks.
Thanos kept his hand raised, chest heaving, waiting for the dark to prove him right.
The darkness answered by pressing harder. It swallowed distance first. Krishna and the radiant lotus seemed to recede without moving. Then it swallowed scale. Galaxies, shards, and empty space collapsed into the same black pressure. Thanos turned his head, searching for resistance, for panic, for any fracture in the being before him. None came. That was the reversal. The dark had obeyed Thanos, yet it had not touched Krishna. From inside the sealed black, Krishna's voice arrived level and near, as if spoken beside a quiet river. Darkness, he said, is only the absence of song. Krishna did not answer the darkness with force. He brought the flute to his lips, and the first note slipped into the void as a thin, clear line. For a heartbeat, the black pressure swallowed it. No star returned, no galaxy stirred. Then the note sharpened. It rang against the dead space and split into 1,000 bright threads.
Each one moving with a precise path through the ruin. The threads found the broken rims of galaxies first. They touched torn spiral arms, crossed empty gaps, and pulled scattered starfields back into alignment like sutures closing a cosmic wound. Dust ignited along their edges. Frozen gas began to turn. Dead suns received the sound not as command, but as breath. One core flared, then another. Then entire clusters answered in waves, white, gold, and blue fire opening across the dark. The melody climbed higher,
and every note carried a task. One sealed a fractured timeline shard. One drew a collapsed nebula outward.
One threaded through a field of ash and left newborn light behind it. The void could not hold its shape.
Darkness peeled back in layers, revealing distances Thanos had just erased. Krishna kept playing, steady and unhurried.
While the lotus beneath him poured radiance into the widening paths of sound, galaxies rejoined at their torn seams. Stars reignited in ordered constellations. The dead horizon became a living map again, not shattered by power, but rebuilt by melody.
When the last restored constellation held its line, Thanos took one backward step. The movement was small, but the groundless void betrayed it. His heel scraped across a floating slab of fractured time, and the slab spun away beneath him.
He caught himself with a hard twist of his shoulders and thrust his burned hand forward. The stones should have answered. They had answered extinction. They had answered command. Now they spat heat back into his palm and pulsed out of rhythm, each flare colliding with the next until his arm shook from wrist to shoulder. Thanos clenched his fist and forced another order through them.
Nothing died. Nothing bent. A nearby star, newly awake, held steady against his will. That was the cut he could not cover. The power had not vanished. It had refused his interpretation of it. Krishna lowered the flute, and the final note continued without breath, circling the Titan like a ring of pressure.
Thanos stared at the stones as if they had betrayed him first, then raised his head toward Krishna. "What have you done to them?" he demanded. Krishna stepped closer, and the restored light did not move aside for him. It moved with him. "I have done nothing to the stones,"
he said. "I am not correcting the universe." Thanos dragged in a breath through clenched teeth. The stones flared again,
weaker this time. Krishna's voice cut through the crackling heat. "I am correcting your misunderstanding of it." Krishna lifted one hand, and the restored stars folded inward like doors closing without sound. Thanos swung his burned fist toward him,
but the void broke apart before the stones could answer. Light stretched into smoke. The floating fragments of time became cracked streets under his feet.
His adult strength was gone from his own reach. The ground rose too close, the air hit too hot, and his fingers shook against the ash falling around him. Titans stood beneath a burning sky. Towers leaned over the horizon, their upper floors pouring fire into winds thick with grit. Sirens cut through the streets in broken pulses. People ran past him, coughing, dragging the injured, calling names that vanished under the roar of collapsing metal. A child screamed for water beside a dry fountain. No water came. Thanos turned toward a shelter entrance and saw bodies pressing against the sealed doors from both sides, each shove weaker than the last. He reached for power again. There was only a child's grip closing on empty air. Then he spotted a familiar evacuation platform lifting beyond the smoke. He ran toward it, feet slipping on hot dust, but the platform rose before he reached the rail. Hands pounded from inside its glass as flames swallowed the launch tower below. The sky flashed white. The blast threw him backward into the street. He landed hard, breath knocked from his chest, ears ringing. Above him, Titan's sky burned without mercy, and the child he had buried inside the Conqueror could do nothing but crawl through ash and watch his world die. The ash under Thanos' palms stopped falling. Each grain hung in the air, fixed between his fingers and the ruined street, while Krishna's voice entered the silence from every direction. "You named it balance, because that word could stand where grief stood." Thanos shoved himself upright, but the street lengthened beneath his feet, keeping Krishna's voice out of reach. "I acted when others waited," he growled. Around him, the memory answered with doors slamming, engines failing, hands scraping at sealed glass. Krishna did not raise his volume. "You did not seek order first. You sought a wall high enough that loss could not climb over it." The child's hands at Thanos' sides curled into fists. The ash began moving again, not downward now, but inward, spiraling toward his chest, as if the memory itself were being drawn through him. "No," Thanos said. He stepped back, and every footprint filled with black dust. Krishna's voice pressed closer. "Control became your shelter. Death became your instrument. Fear wore the name of mercy." The street split open with a crack that ran from horizon to horizon. Thanos roared, and the sound tore the illusion apart. Titan's ruins snapped away.
The multiversal void slammed back around him in broken fragments of light. His burned hand was already raised. The gauntlet convulsed before he could close his fist.
Sparks burst from every stone, crossing each other in violent, unstable arcs. Thanos forced his fingers inward. The metal shrieked, his arm buckled. Still he roared at Krishna, spit breaking from his mouth as the stones hammered heat through his bones. Thanos ripped his arm downward, and the unstable stones answered with a blast that split the void beneath him. Broken timelines buckled into a ring around his body. He seized them like chains and dragged their dead moons out of orbit. One by one, the moons ignited, cracking open into burning meteors the size of cities. "You want truth?" he roared. "Then survive mine." He hurled the first meteor straight at Krishna. The vacuum flashed red. A second followed, then a third, each one dragging tales of molten stone and broken gravity.
Krishna did not retreat. The meteors crossed the distance fast enough to shear starlight into sparks.
Before impact, the gauntlet jolted sideways. The fourth meteor veered off course, slamming through a fractured galaxy and tearing its spiral apart. The backlash punched into Thanos' shoulder. He staggered, planted one hand into empty space, and forced the stones harder. Panic became motion. Motion became weapons. He tore open storm fronts from collapsed suns, twisting them into black cyclones filled with fire, ice, and razor fragments of time. The storms rolled outward in stacked walls, grinding against each other, swallowing the light Krishna had restored. Thanos climbed through the recoil instead of stepping back. Each command burned his nerves. Each burn made him pull more power. Meteors rained from every angle now. Cyclones closed behind them. The battlefield shrank to one target, Krishna, standing at the center, with the entire violence of Thanos' denial descending on him.
Krishna did not raise a shield. He did not step aside. As the first wall of fire reached the space before him,
He placed one foot forward, and the void beneath it rang like struck crystal. The sound did not fade. It widened. A second Krishna stood to his left. Another formed above him, then hundreds, then thousands.
the battlefield lost its center as blue divine forms unfolded across every horizon, each one steady, each one facing the descending storm.
Thanos' meteors no longer had a single target. Their paths shuddered, caught between countless points of stillness. The cyclones twisted harder,
But their rims began to fray, as if reality itself refused to carry so much violence any farther. From every Krishna,
one voice emerged, not louder than thunder. Deeper, it entered the burning stones, the torn timelines, the collapsed suns, and made them vibrate in the same rhythm. You measure strength by what obeys your hand, the infinite forms declared. Creation measures strength by what can live after your hand is gone. The words struck the void like pillars driven into foundation.
stars that had gone dim pulsed once, their edges holding instead of breaking apart. Time, fragments stopped cutting into each other. Gravity bent toward the radiance instead of the storm.
Thanos stared into a sky filled with Krishna, and for the first time, his attack had nowhere to land without touching the whole of existence. The first meteor struck the edge of Krishna's melody and stopped dead, its molten face flattening against invisible rhythm. For one breath,
Thanos leaned forward, expecting detonation. Instead, cracks ran through the burning stone in clean, branching lines. Fire drained inward.
Petals of light pushed out from the fracture. The city-sized weapon opened into a cosmic lotus, vast enough to cradle a dead moon. Then the second meteor bloomed, then the third. Across the battlefield, every falling mass changed shape before impact, violence folding into radiant geometry.
Ash, turning to pollen-bright sparks that drifted through restored gravity. The cyclones hit the flowers and unwound into rivers of blue flame.
Thanos slammed his fist down, trying to force the stones to reclaim the attack. "No," he snarled. "I am inevitable." The gauntlet answered with a choking burst, not power but resistance. Its surface split along the knuckles. The stones flashed out of sequence, each pulse cutting into his arm with separate pain. Krishna's infinite forms drew back into one. He walked through the field of blooming meteors.
Each step making the lotuses rotate away from his path. Thanos lifted the gauntlet for one final snap. His fingers would not close.
Krishna reached him and touched the metal with 2 fingers. No blow landed, no blast followed. The gauntlet softened into light, broke apart grain by grain, and carried the infinity stones with it. Purple, red, blue, orange, yellow, green. Each color dissolved into shimmering stardust. Thanos fell to his knees, staring at his empty hand while his breath broke into short, shallow pulls. His mouth opened, but no command came. The silence after Thanos' last command stretched across the lotus-lit void. His hand stayed open, fingers curled around nothing, the skin still twitching from power that no longer answered. He tried to rise. His knee scraped across the fractured ground, slipped, and dropped back down. No stone flared, no force gathered, only his breath moved, harsh and uneven, pulling through clenched teeth. Krishna lowered himself beside him, close enough that the battlefield's remaining tremors quieted around them. Thanos did not look at the stars. He looked at the empty space above his palm. "Then tell me," he said, each word dragged out like metal from a wound. "What is balance?"
Krishna placed one hand against the ground between them. The dead fragments around their feet began to reflect lives instead of light, hands reaching for children.
Worlds turning under morning suns, Mouths opening in interrupted songs, names never spoken again. Thanos jerked back, but the reflections followed the curve of his breath. Krishna said, "Balance is not half against half."
It is the moment you see no life as separate from your own. When one being hungers, you are touched. When one being falls, you are reduced.
When one being is lifted, you are made whole. Thanos' jaw tightened. He forced his palm shut, but nothing obeyed the gesture. More faces surfaced in the broken ground, not as numbers, not as dust, but as people reaching the final second he had taken from them. His breathing faltered. Moisture gathered along his lower lids, thickened, and spilled before he could stop it. "I see them," he whispered. "All of them." Krishna lifted the flute again, and this time the battlefield did not brace for power. It listened. The first note crossed the broken void as a thin line of blue fire, touching the stardust that had once been the stones. The dust did not gather into weapons.
It spread outward, entering cracked moons, burnt atmospheres, and silent orbits. One by one, dead suns pulled breath back into their cores.
Their light returned slowly, not as an explosion, but as dawn moving through deep water. Thanos stayed on his knees. His empty hand trembled, then lowered flat against the ground. Where his palm touched the fractured surface, a small pulse answered.
And he did not try to seize it. He let it pass through him. The renewal widened. Cities erased from time, reformed as foundations first.
Then streets, then voices rising in startled fragments. Rivers found their beds. Seeds split under fresh soil. Across the multiverse,
Life came back through connection, not command. Then a wound in the sky resisted, black and spinning, holding one last pocket of ruin.
Krishna played a sharper phrase. Thanos pushed himself upright, bowed his head, and stepped back from the center of power.
the wound loosened. Light threaded its rim, stitched it closed, and left only a quiet starfield. Krishna lowered the flute.
His form thinned into radiance, then into sound, then into distance. Before vanishing, he said, "Begin with what you protect, not what you control."
Thanos stood alone among restored stars. He opened his hand, empty and steady, and took his first step without conquest.